One of the ways that blockchain will help us transform society is by enabling us to write up and execute little contracts that solve everyday game theory dilemmas. Public goods dilemmas are one of the types of game theory problems that blockchain will help us solve. And in this video, I'd like to go over an example of a public goods problem that you might be familiar with, in particular, Kickstarter. Why is Kickstarter a solution to a public goods problem? And what would it look like if Kickstarter were on a blockchain? And why might the blockchain version be better than Kickstarter, which is the version we have right now? That's what I'm exploring in this video. Briefly, here's how Kickstarter works. Anybody can post a project, and there's all kinds of projects. Board games, documentaries, clever little clothing companies, cider startups, etc., etc. And whoever's doing a project, they post how much money they need to fully fund their project, and they post an expiration date. And Kickstarter projects are fun and meaningful, so even the for-profit companies that post to Kickstarter, they tend to be something that people in the community really want badly enough to donate. Not invest, but donate. And that's actually pretty interesting that people would donate to a for-profit company. What it means is that people have value for the existence of that business over and above any products they may buy from it. And I kind of get that, actually. I mean, for one, as an economist, there's consumer surplus, so anytime a business exists, we know that the workers who work there and the people who buy from there, they get value from that interchange. But it is more than that. Like when I drive by one of my favorite businesses, like a tea shop, I oftentimes think I'm not going to buy anything from there right now, but I'm glad I have the option. Let's use our own example. So let's say Fred and George Weasley want to start a joke shop. And this is both a for-profit business, and it also helps meet a dire need in the community to help solve the lack of humor epidemic. Fred and George Weasley are going to go to Kickstarter, and they're going to post that they need $30,000 to buy the materials to get that joke shop up and running. And they post an expiration date of July 31st. They also promise to give their donors a free t-shirt and whoopee cushion if they donate at least $50 to the project. You decide to give them $100, but only if enough people pledge to meet their $30,000 startup fee. So you're not just giving them the money. When July 31st rolls around, one of two things will happen. Either you'll get your $100 back, or the twins will have enough money to fully fund their project and they can really get it up and running. This gets around the problem that a lot of startups have really cool ideas, but you're hesitant to donate because if you donate and they don't get enough money to really get their project off the ground, then you've lost your money with nothing to show. Since this happens with even the best intentioned project, it stops people from donating, which stops people from donating, and it's just a negative cycle. And Kickstarter solved that problem. And just to be clear, you don't get your money back. Even if the twins make a fortune on their joke shop, all you get is the whoopee cushion and t-shirt. The reason you fund them is you believe in the mission of making the world a funnier place, and you're willing to give up some money just for the existence of that shop. I'm going to argue that even though the joke shop's products, like the whoopee cushions and things like that, those are private goods, they're not public goods, I'm going to argue that the existence of that joke shop and the value people have for it, that is a public good. And it's a little bit ironic, so I hope you think about that as I go over a more formal definition of a public good. So why is this a public goods problem? A public good is something that is non-rival and non-excludable. A good is rival if my consumption of the product diminishes your ability to consume the product. So an ice cream cone is perfectly rival because when I eat the ice cream cone, that completely prevents you from eating the same ice cream cone. Music in a public park is more or less non-rival because when I sit and listen to that music, it does not at all diminish your ability to listen to the same music and enjoy it. A good is excludable if it is possible to stop you from consuming it. I can stop you from consuming an ice cream cone, for example, by not handing you the ice cream cone until you've paid. I cannot stop you from enjoying music in a public park. Of course, it's easier to profit from excludable goods than non-excludable goods, so innovators work really hard to make goods that are non-excludable into excludable goods. For example, at one point in time, posting music to the internet was essentially a non-excludable good, just like playing music in the park would have been, until innovators figured out digital ways of stopping people from listening to that music unless they'd paid for it. And of course that has a lot to do with how easy is it to pirate digital goods. One confusing thing here is that not all public goods are provided by the government, and not all goods that are or should be provided by the government are public goods. For example, education is actually not a public good. It's actually very excludable. So if a student hasn't paid tuition, then I can kick them out of my classroom. In this way, the concept of the public good is actually horribly named. But we're stuck with it for historical reasons. Basically, the person who coined the term public good was hell-bent on confusing Economics 101 students for many generations to come. But when it comes to blockchain, a lot of the public goods problems that blockchain will help us solve have nothing to do with government, and never did. So don't let your brain confuse you by the word public. Public goods create a free rider problem, and everybody wants other people to pay for the public good because once it exists, you can always just enjoy it for free. That's what non-excludability does. Some Kickstarter projects are actually classic public goods. For example, you might find a Kickstarter project to put on a Shakespeare play in a public park. But even something like Fred and George Weasley's for-profit joke shop has some public goods aspects to it, especially if we have real value for the existence of that business apart from our own purchasing habits there. Knowing that this joke shop exists makes me happy, and my being happy about the existence of that joke shop does not prevent you from being just as happy that that joke shop exists. And that's non-rivalry. And it's not possible to exclude people from knowing about the joke shop's existence and being happy about that. So this is also non-excludable. So the joke shop's products are private goods. Those aren't public goods at all. But the joke shop's existence is a public good. Let's look at the game theory behind a person's decision about whether or not to donate to a particular non-Kickstarter project. And we'll start with a two-person version of this to keep things simple. Say a friend comes to you and asks for some donations to a whale documentary project she's working on. Say it'll cost $24 for her to fully produce the documentary. You get $18 worth of happiness from knowing that such a documentary exists and watching it. And she asks for only a $12 contribution, so you'd get a surplus of 6 euros of happiness from contributing, assuming that she gets the second donor to also donate $12 so that she can fully fund the $24 documentary. However, if she cannot get that second donor to donate $12, then you've just lost your $12 and the documentary will be underfunded, and therefore it'll suck. Let's say that you only get 9 euros of happiness from the underfunded version of the documentary. That means you get -3 euros from donating if the other person doesn't also donate. However, the best scenario would be for the other person to donate and for your friend to create a crappy documentary, in which case you enjoy the 9 euros of happiness that you get from the underfunded documentary, but you don't have to pay anything. This is actually a prisoner's dilemma. The dominant strategy for both players is to not donate in this case. So the project is probably not going to be funded. But then Kickstarter comes along and allows you this third option, which is to say you'll donate if and only if the other player donates. And now we have two Nash equilibrium, but one of those is a better Nash equilibrium. Suddenly we've created the conditions for one of these documentaries to actually get funded. By adding that third option, Kickstarter is turning this public goods problem into a non-problem in a really clever way. And obviously it's possible to scale this up to a 1,000 player problem rather than a 2-player problem. Now I can't represent this in a classic game theory payoff matrix, because if I were to even try to represent a 3-player problem in a game theory matrix, I'd need some version of a 3-dimensional matrix, which you can do in 2 dimensions cleverly, but a 1,000 dimension matrix does not fit well into a 2-dimensional video, so I won't try. But the 1,000 player game with the more realistic $50,000 documentary, that works the same way. You always get 18 euros of happiness from the existence of that whale documentary, and your total final utility is that 18 euros minus what you pay, toward the documentary. But things are a little more exaggerated when we're talking about the $50,000 documentary as opposed to the cheaper one, because any contribution you make less than $18 is basically a drop in the bucket. It doesn't really matter one way or another for the making of that film. You can go through the same logic as before, asking yourself the question, if 100 people donate $12 each, will I wish I had donated or not donated? If 101 people donate $12 each, will I wish I would have donated or not donated? And you go through all the options and you find that in every single case, your best response is to not donate. Also, if your friend only raises $200 toward her $50,000 goal, then she can't produce any type of documentary. You've just lost your $12. So your $12 contribution is a drop in the bucket. That's an economics term related to public goods problems. Your dominant strategy is to be a free rider and let everybody else pay. But everybody uses the same logic, so nobody contributes. So public goods problems are basically just multiplayer prisoner's dilemmas. Okay, so Kickstarter solves this public goods dilemma by adding this option to have a little conditional contract. Fine. But how does this relate to blockchain? Well, Fred and George Weasley actually have two options. One option would be to set up an account on Kickstarter, but if they do that, Kickstarter is going to take a 5% cut of any donations they get in order to cover the operating costs at Kickstarter. The other option would be for Fred and George to go up to the Ethereum blockchain and to type up a little smart contract that did the exact same thing that the Kickstarter contract did. So how should they decide between these two options? Because there's costs and benefits to both ways. First, the financial cost. It's actually not free to execute smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain. If you look under the hood of the Ethereum blockchain computer, you're going to find these little robots that execute people's smart contracts. But these robots need to eat. And they only eat one thing, which is Ether, this cryptocurrency that's attached to the Ethereum blockchain. You feed them Ether coins and they do their job executing your little smart contracts for you. So the financial cost of the Ethereum little smart contract method depends on the price of Ether. But the financial cost isn't the only thing. If they're going to do a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain, they'd need to code to type that up. And maybe they don't know how to do that, so maybe they'd actually have to hire a coder. Marketing is also a consideration. Kickstarter has an international reputation, and random people go there just to browse potential projects they could invest in. So if Fred and George just want to get their family and friends to invest, then maybe the Ethereum blockchain is cheaper. But the smart contract we've talked about so far on this video has no marketing plan built in. There are different models for building marketing into a blockchain, which I won't go over in this video. But these are the issues that the blockchain community will need to think about pretty deeply moving forward. So Kickstarter might have an advantage when it comes to marketing, at least for now, but blockchains could have an advantage when it comes to the risk of future corruption. If you're worried, for example, about the business leadership at Kickstarter doing something shady with your information or your social network, then you might want to consider a blockchain. The smart contract on a blockchain does not have those kinds of trust issues. The computer code will not change the rules on you, and you can always look under the hood to see what it's doing. So there's costs and benefits both ways when comparing blockchain to Kickstarter. So in any case, I hope this video has given you a better sense of what a public good is and how blockchain might help solve these kinds of dilemmas.